All right, guys, welcome to TNL. Very excited about the guests we have today. First of all, very excited about the results that we're getting from, just people out there working really hard and finishing this year. We've had we've obviously never been more inundated with leads. It's kind of funny because what people join us say we couldn't get leads at our old company. I'm like, were they trying? Like, everybody seems to be like really wanting life insurance, and today's guests are not unlike the other ones we have, right? We have people on that are really good at sales and they're having really good results. People always ask about, trainers and say, who's the best one to listen to? It depends. Everybody's got somebody they connect with. I got in this business. It's kind of funny because I was reminded this week by Andrew and Paul that they have had their insurance licenses longer than me. It's just funny. Like, I was like, really? Like, they got them when they were 18. And Paul McClain and I used to work together, and I liked listening to what he said. We were different, but he really genuinely cared about the clients and was willing to stand up for them. And that was a big deal for me. Like, he if they would say, whatever it is they were going to say, he just wouldn't go, okay. Or he really genuinely cared that they got protected. And so when we got rolling here, he's probably one of the most consistent producers I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he's somebody that just always, was always working and being very productive. And he's got a lot of people on his team that are doing the same. And he understands how to help challenge them and appropriately educate them on where. And at the end of the day, a big part of it is somebody said to me, the other day, what's our strategy around this? I go, you need less strategy and more work. I love you, but like a lot of people are strategizing while everybody else is moving. I don't tend to strategize every couple of days. We just go to work. Like, good attitude, good activity. Let's make it happen. Kind of get out of my way. Let's get aggressive and let's roll. We'll figure it out as we're going along, but let's just go do our deal. It's always like, I always laugh when like people are like, they're worried about the play clock. I'm like, well, dude, like, just run a play. Like, that doesn't seem very complicated. I don't need to be an NFL head coach. Like, run the play. Do something. You've been playing football your whole life. Snap the ball and do something. Isn't that better than the thing going, man? Yeah. Like, go make. And if I'm watching, please just do something. So we have a lot of folks that are doing a lot less strategizing, and a lot more working. These instant leads are coming in the internet. They're pouring in. People are like, well, what do you think I should do? I would get aggressive and get a bunch of them and sell a lot of life insurance. That's what I would. That's what we did. That's how we launched a company. Yeah. We launched a company. We had no leads. We worked with vendors to find leads. And then the only way we could get leads were to buy all their leads. So we bought all of them. Had we strategized, we probably have been like, this is a bad idea. And on paper, it was probably a bad idea. But it was definitely not a bad idea. So Paul has Rochelle and Teresa and Chris and Coleman today. And, very different people having very good results. And I think not unlike a lot of other people. I think they don't start kicking the door down writing $40,000 a month. That's the process. The problem is everybody, I always say to people, they go like, well, can you give me a little bit of a, golden nugget? I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I think what it means to them is give me something that's a shortcut that'll make me magically good right away. Okay, here's a shortcut. You have to work really hard, and then you have to have a really good attitude, and you have to be positive, and you have to stand up for the client, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to challenge them, and you can never, ever, ever take any of it personally, because business is not personal, and you have to keep moving. You're going to have good days and bad days and great days and terrible days, and the numbers are so good that after all that, you're going to do really well. You're going to feel really good about protecting clients. You're going to make a lot of money for your family. That's the answer. But you can't have any of the rest of it without you have to go to work and do that. It's just the way that it works. And we've all done that. I can go to Luke and go, Luke, personal training. What's the secret to, getting a six pack? And he's like, you got to meal prep. You got to have to buy time for like 20 minutes. I'm like, you got to do all that? Okay, I'm not in. Like, I'm just not committed to that. But when you're committed to it, you're committed to it. I'm committed to protecting the heck out of the families and committed to taking care of my kids and making sure that. So that was easy for me. And there's no shortcut. But you can condense time frames the more you work. So Paul McClain, I'm sure all the guests, they will help you condense those time frames. Appreciate you guys. Have an outstanding day. I'm going to turn over to Paul.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you for having us, Sean, on the TNL. In fact, this could not be more of an exciting month for what we do. This is Life Insurance Awareness Month, and what a beautiful month for people to start, being more aware of life insurance. And I think that the last couple months, it's really become prevalent that what we do, it's important. I've always thought that. I think more clients are thinking that, as you've seen the amount of leads that come in, week out. More families are thinking about life insurance than ever before. They turn on the news, they start thinking about life insurance. And awareness has led to us having more lead flow than we've ever had before, which is allowing us to grow at a crazy rapid rate. I was talking to Sean, he said, man, we're looking at a triple from 1 year from 1 year to the next, from October to October. I mean, think about that. And it's not like a triple when you go from 10,000 to 30. This is talking like 7 million to 21 million in issue paid life volume. And so when we step into the month of life insurance awareness month, I think what that does is it puts the focus on something that is extremely important. We're aware of that as an insurance agent. I think that the best producers have more awareness of that than other producers. I think that personal sales at a high volume is really reflective of how much you care about the clients. And a lot of times that boils down to the fact that you're aware of what takes place when a client dies, And so I thought a lot about this the last, couple of weeks as we moved into September, which is the National Life Insurance Awareness Month. And so I got a couple people to join me that, they've got a story about life insurance, what it means to them. They're not only just aware of what it meant to them and maybe something they've experienced or they've gone through or they're experiencing, but they're also able to tell that story to the clients. It really helped move them in a direction to protect their family. And see, I think when it comes to telling stories, that's the best way to communicate. That's the best way to connect. And when somebody's already raised their hand and they filled out a form and they said, I want to buy life insurance for my family, I want to protect my family. Really what's left is you just going over there and the client being convinced that you truly do care, right? It's the whole cliche that clients don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. But when you go sit with that family and they know that you really do care about them, that's where you go out there and you're the most effective. You can be bold, you can be direct, and you can move, guide, and direct them to protecting their family. And so it's really getting that understanding of how important what we do is. And if you look at the bare bones of it, right, there's two big things that are catastrophic for somebody to endure. One of them is losing somebody that's significant to them, somebody that they live life with. I tell a client like, Bob, if, Mary, if you're shaking Bob, tomorrow morning and he doesn't come to, and that gut feeling that you have that the person that you've lived life with for all these years is no longer going to be there. And now you've got to go through life without that person. And everything you do throughout the day reminds you of that. When you go to the coffee maker and his coffee, all these things, that's one of the hardest things you'll ever have to endure to kind of grow through and go through that. The second thing is a financial disarray. When you all of a sudden wake up and your financial situation does not look the same. You've got an adjusted income. How do I pay the bills? How do I do these things? That stress is the most weighing stress that most people could ever endure. When you combine both those things, think about the impact. And so what we do is that important, guys. And so what I want to do today is really kind of jump into some of these stories that for me, as I've listened to different producers talk about their stories, the stories they tell in the home, it gave me a different level of conviction of what I did. And when I went into a client's house, if they gave me an objection, like they want to think about it or they want to talk to their kids or they got to look at their budget, that stuff didn't hold any weight because my conviction was so strong that none of those objections could shake me or rattle me because I knew that this was the most important thing. And it was stories that kind of brought that to the forefront of my mind and my ability to tell stories in the client's house that allowed me to be really effective and efficient to do so. And so I love this month, Rochelle, because as we step into it, by the way, Rochelle's got a phenomenal story. So I'm going to bounce to a couple others, and then we're going to bring it back and have Rochelle talk about, how she tells her story. And she's so great at guiding clients with that. But what I want to do is kind of leave you with this, and I'm going to bounce to Teresa Prendota, and that we have on the call today as well. I was driving the other day. It's just probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So I guess it was not the other day. It was the other day, almost a half a decade ago. But I'd got my wife a car. I got her this new Yukon XL. because we overproduced and the regular Yukon just wasn't cutting it 4 years ago. You know what I mean? She's like, I gotta get some trunk space up in here. And so I didn't know this. So I'm driving down the road. I leave the dealership and it's normal. I'm driving back home, right? And I turn on my blinker to make a right to get into the next lane. And so I'm getting into the next lane, and all of a sudden my butt starts vibrating. You know, the seat's like, I'm like, what in the heck's going on? You know, I'm freaking out. I start throwing my elbows back like somebody, you know, got behind me. I didn't realize that these new cars, you know, they had, you know, the seats vibrate if there's a car next to you. So your right butt cheek starts vibrating if there's a car on the right hand side. I didn't know that, you know? And so what it did do though is it heightened my awareness right away, and I got back into my lane. And I realized that what that does is it makes you aware of the blind spots, the blind spot that, hey, if I wasn't aware of that, my foreseeable future was not going to look so good, right? I was getting ready to get in a car accident, and it was not going to end well. So it heightened my awareness at that moment, and I was able to become aware that there was a blind spot, that I didn't know that there was a disaster right there if I didn't know about it. And I got back into the lane I needed to get back into. And I think that's what this month is. And I think we should be talking about that. We should be sharing stories about that. It's heightening the awareness of people that maybe they have a blind spot. Maybe they've not thought about life insurance. They haven't had something shake or rattle them enough to be able to say, I need to get this. And maybe the agents out there, I know for myself, a turning point was when I was rattled and I delivered that first death claim for me, and I saw the difference it made for the client. My close ratio, I like to call it a care ratio. My care ratio went up moving forward because I just knew, I felt it. And now when I went into the client's house, it was a lot easier to compartmentalize and put them first, not my paycheck, because I knew what it did. And so, Teresa, I know I got you on, and thank you for joining. You are a Hall of Fame producer. So you're a 30, 40K a month every month. You are Mrs. Consistent is what I call you, because I don't care what's going on. I don't care where you're at, what's taking place. You write your business, you get your production done. It's a big goal. And I know it's because you really care about the families that you serve. If you kind of share the story that you've got, that when you go to a client's house, maybe you remind yourself of it before you step in. And then the story that you tell your clients that you're sitting with, that, you know, you kind of help guide, direct them, and maybe establish and grow more value in the story that you tell them.
Certainly, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I actually have a couple of different stories depending on what kind of type of client I'm sitting with. One in particular is my own ex-husband. I'm transparent. Everybody knows that. 1994, I got divorced. My 3 children, called me. Dad was diagnosed with cancer. And I said, oh goodness, please tell me he's got insurance. Nope, he doesn't have insurance. So his 5 brothers and sisters and myself had to pay for his funeral, because that's my children's father, and we were friends, we were amicable. And so I just, I tell people that I've already lost a spouse, now that's not everybody's story. There's so many more people that are younger, but it's just, that's one. If I'm in the home with, somebody that says, I said, well, they lost a spouse. Did you have insurance? No. Well, geez, neither did I. And this is why it's so important, and just telling that story about how it affects you personally. If I'm with a younger family, and they want to talk to their children, I'm saying, I know exactly how you feel, because my daughter won't let me take on any more expense than I need to. But the truth is that I made decisions a long time before she was born. So, yes, we want their opinion, but clearly, you can make a good decision. And I just look around the house and say, I would discuss, but I would ultimately make the final decision on my own, because our children will always try to protect us and not want us to do something for them. And in the meantime, what happens is, like what happened to myself, is I ended up paying for my mom's funeral back in 1983. At that time, it was $8,000 because she was Catholic and did not want to be cremated. So these are, it depends on who I'm speaking with. Like I always learned from you guys, Sean, especially, go meet people at where they're at. So if it's a young couple, a lot of times, Paul, I'll tell your story that you trained me on 5 years ago about the motorcycle, and how you wrote the policy and they were hemming and hawing, and then the man didn't make it home before they even had made their first payment, and they got paid the 250,000. So, a lot of different stories as we go along. I've also given out death claims, which also makes it really real, about what we do. As a matter of fact, I have one going through right now. And the man that I had written, he just didn't want to leave his brother who lives on a boat, his expenses, because his brother doesn't even have a house. So, it's important to talk about who's going to take care of you at the end, who's you're going to be your beneficiary. What does that look like? Do you have an executor? All those things, not only just, okay, so who's your beneficiary? It really going a little bit deeper in the beginning makes them, like I've learned from so many people, think about, okay, yeah, John's going to be my beneficiary. John will take care of everything, my son or whoever it may be. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, Teresa, for one, the specificity in your stories, it draws you in. I think the more specific you are, when it comes to the details, the more real it becomes for that client. Like when you say the years and 1983 and all these different things, I believe it brings them into that story. In the beginning, did you see a difference, like in your approach, when you were kind of just telling the client, like, hey, this is what you should do.
Right.
This is what you need to do, opposed to like structuring that within a story? Have you seen a kind of a difference between the result, and why do you think that is?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that's because the emotion that you build, it really does. It paints the picture. It makes them stop and think, okay, this too could happen to me. I don't want to be stuck with maybe, having to pay for the funeral or have a car wash or a fish fry or whatever. I tell the story, and this is a true story. I have a client that had a little girl who drowned in a pool. She was 5 years old. There was a woman sitting at the pool in a wheelchair that could not help her. This is a fact. The woman called me. She said, Teresa, my niece passed away. They didn't have insurance. We put up a GoFundMe account. Would you be willing to donate? I said, absolutely. Give me the website. I went in, I donated. I looked 3 days later, and there was $250 in there. I was blown away thinking this little girl doesn't even have the money to be buried. I tell that story as well. The fact that the woman it still upsets me thinking about what that woman could have felt like in a wheelchair that couldn't save that little baby. If that's not emotional, I don't know what is. So I do, though. It really depends on who I'm sitting with, what story. I've got several. I even have Aunt Tina from Brian Mendel. So, I mean, you have to have things that will create emotion and, like you said, be specific about your stories.
That's so good. Well, I'm gonna end up switching over here to you, Rochelle, and kind of have you go through some of your stories. To kind of talk a little bit about what Teresa was just speaking about, all these different stories. I remember, when I first kind of got this concept of like how important it was to tell stories. Like for me, I would go in and I start telling people stuff, and it just wasn't enjoyable. It was almost like I had an arm wrestling match that was taking place with them, and it just wasn't any fun. But when I would tell stories and I would articulate, about a situation that I was really talking to them, maybe they said, the client said, I want to talk over to my kids. And I start telling them a story about, how I feel. My mom feels the same way. She doesn't want to think about life insurance. I don't want her thinking about life insurance. Yeah. And then she just says, well, I'm just going to make this decision regardless. And I start using all these different stories to communicate what I'm trying to get my message across. What that's allowing the client to do is to purchase. Like people love to buy. They hate to be sold. Yeah. And when you're telling somebody and you're not using a story or a third party example and stuff like that, and making it real for them, it's hard for them to really grab onto that. And then also you come across as more of a salesperson opposed to somebody that's sitting back and just saying, hey, let me tell you a story. Let me be the seat that rattles you and get you just aware that you might be there might be a blind spot here because this is what's going to take place. This is what can happen. This is what I've seen happen. And when you tell the stories, what I think that does is when you go through the financial inventory, it builds their picture. Everybody's picture is different. They start to see what it looks like when something happens. They can now visualize it. But when you start telling that story and asking questions, it gets them to live in that story. And you take something that's not tangible, something that they can't touch or feel, and you make it as tangible as possible. And in that moment, every second that goes by as you're telling a story, what are they doing? Mm-hmm. They're living in that story. They're imagining themselves in that story. And see, the thing is this, people really can't tell the difference between what they've experienced and imagination. They haven't experienced it because they can't. If they had experienced it, they wouldn't be here, right? It's one of those things where you're gone when it actually benefits and pays out. But if you can get them to imagine it through the story and the emotion, like as Teresa's talking about, that baby, for one, I mean, it hits me harder because I've got 4 daughters and I'm just like, God, but it gets you to feel that emotion, and emotion leads to motion. Because everybody makes a decision based off emotion, and then they got to support it based off logic, which is the financial inventory and making it affordable and explaining the product, all that kind of stuff. That's the logic. But until they actually understand the emotion behind it and they can see it and they can feel it, they don't move and they won't get past what's holding them back. And maybe that's the objection that they're giving you or whatever that may be. So Rachel, let's dive into your story. I know you've got one that you kind of, go into the client's house. You had really what I think still the longest streak without a no sell from day one. Mm-hmm. Like I was a disaster, like I was like praying. One of my prayers, can somebody give me a voided check this week? You went out and you had a lot of clients that just said yes. You didn't have a no sell for a long time when you first got started. And I thought at first, like, why is that? And then you got up and you spoke at a sales training and you talked about why life insurance was important to you. And I was like, got it. That's why she's so good and why her close ratio is so high. She cares about the clients and she goes in thinking about the family, because you were in, like everybody, be clear. When's the last time you recruited somebody and said, I'm just so rich, I've retired 4 times. I thought, hey, get my life license. Why not? Well. Golfing, fishing, life license. Life license. Yeah. That's not usually they come with spotted failures like I did and you did, everybody else did, struggling, trying to figure something out. Yep. So you're in a spot where you really did need to make money. I know your financial situation. We don't have to necessarily get into that, but I know you needed, so you could have easily thought about yourself going in like, I need to make money for my kids, but you didn't.
No.
Why was that? And if you could talk about what life insurance means to you and then also the story and how you communicate that.
Well, it's not like what it means to me. It's like what it means not to have it. In 2014, I'm going to crest like 2013, 2014, I lost 5 family members. And whether it be like my sister-in-law's extended family, my brother passed away 2 weeks after. And mind you, between that, I have a big family. And my brother was set to deploy. His mother-in-law dies tragically here on Main Street. He comes back. They are in the military, gives him time to bury his mother-in-law. He leaves again. He's halfway there, and my brother starts passing away. We were able to put him on life support for 3 days to give the family the time to say goodbye. And the thing is about my brother when he passed away, it wasn't like a common brother that I went outside and played catch with and that we got to romp around and he gave me bruises and, I slapped him around a little bit. My brother, David, had cerebral palsy, and that's graded between 1 and 5, 1 being walking and mobility and 5 being, hooked up on ventilators and stuff throughout your life. David was 4. David had a cognizance. David knew emotion, but he couldn't physically express himself unless he was mad, then duck. But, but by far, he was the encompassment around our world. My dad, we'd sit at the dinner table and he would say, David is your world. Nobody else in this world matters but David and God. That's literally it. And so we grew up, all of us knowing that David eats before you. He gets fed before you put him to bed. You change his pants. You make sure that everything you do encompasses David because he is your priority and nobody else matters. And so that's all I knew for the first 25 years of my life. Is that David came before, and David sincerely came before my kids and my kids put David before themselves. And this was everybody. And if you ever met David, you walk into a room and he just smiles and he makes everybody's day. And still to this day, like, oh, Davey made my day. And I remember I got into a fight with my stepdad the night before. And then I said goodnight to David, and then I get a call thinking my stepdad finally, admitted the fact he lost the game of dominoes. And I got a call that David died. And I'm like, no. Mm-mm. Ambulance comes and they take David to the hospital, and this hospital I used to work at. I'm calling everybody. That coat white's my brother. I don't care how long. What do you have to do? You save him. And 10 minutes he passed, and they revived him enough for us to put him on life support. And there he sat for 3 days because we wanted my brother, who is now being on his way overseas, to get a chance to say goodbye. And he was on life support for 3 days. My brother, unfortunately, didn't get to say goodbye. And that was hard because my dad didn't know how to act. My mom was inconsolable. My family, everybody was there, but everybody was just like, my world. You literally see everybody's world falling apart. And the moment he passed away, my mom goes out, my sister's consoling her, and my dad, and everybody, it's as they should be, just couldn't handle it. And I'm at the foot of the bed, and David's sitting, he's laying down, and I look at my stepdad and said, give me the life insurance number. I'll take care of it. He says, Rochelle, we didn't think about it. And I'm like, you didn't think about it? Like, you didn't think about it. Like, he was given 16 years to live. He's 35. Like, we needed this for him. We needed something in place for him. Because not only that, it's in California, if you're taking care of somebody with special needs, that was a huge portion of my parents' income. They lost $1,200 a month for aiding him, DHSS. And that's a lot of money for people who aren't making money. And when he died, it was gone. Everything was gone. He was a GoFundMe account. And knowing David, knowing the smiling person he is, and just how he brought light to everything, and you would never know. He's just amazing. And the fact that it was just ripped away. And for when I don't like seeing that for people. And my dad passed away 9 months later. And then I was going to be married 2 months after that. So we lost a lot of family, and nobody had life insurance. And my brother's the biggest one that hones and my dad, because there's just people with all this legacy, people with so much memory, people that brought joy to so many people's lives. And their legacy is diminished by the fact that we didn't do what we were supposed to do 10 years ago. And had we have done that, had we have made sure that happened, when my brother came home from overseas, again, from going to war, we wouldn't have had to console and figure out how we're going to pay for David's funeral when we just got done paying for his mother-in-law's. And then shortly after my dad's. It's not fair. And when I sit there and I talk to people, and it's the fact of the matter is it's not fair, because when you die, I get it. It's not your problem. It's not your problem. It's everybody else's. Tell me whose problem you want it to be. And tell me that they don't matter enough, because when you're gone, the only thing people want to live on is your legacy and memory. Just like my brother David, and just like my dad. I'm sorry, I get really emotional because
you're making me emotional. But I think so it's as time goes on, I think we can become numb to stuff. We forget stuff. And I think these are the stories that before you go into a client's house, you tell yourself that, Rochelle, you remind yourself, you told me, like, I think about this, and that's a part of like getting your mind right. It's not like, we're getting ready to go, charge the football field, and we're all in a huddle smack. And I'd rather do that, but we can't. You don't get a locker room. You don't. But they do something as well to get their mind right. To say, hey, our task at hand is to go out there and to attack this other team and do whatever we can, clobber them to win the game. And what we do, it's something that if we don't live the story, if we don't feel the story, then we can't go into the client's house and really allow them to feel how important it is too. It's a mirror, and it comes off of us first. If we walk in and we don't think life insurance is that big of a deal, and you probably have a story like this, you guys watching this, I'm sure there's somebody and if not, like for me in the beginning of the show, I didn't really have a story. I was 19 at that time. I mean, it's changed now, but I didn't have anybody that I could point to that I had lost that was pretty close. But when I heard stories like this, I would think about that, because even if it wasn't my story, your story, as I thought about it and the details of it, it would really make me feel like that God, this is so important. And it would make it real for me. And I could go in the client's house and communicate with passion. When somebody says, this client said I didn't, to stop pressuring them. I didn't have clients say, stop pressuring me, because they knew it was really because I cared, right? I was persistent, but I was persistent from a place of passion because I knew how important this was and how they needed to get it. And that if they died tomorrow, and I knew that were going to die tomorrow, how then would I approach it? Would I be kind of okay? Would I be okay with them saying, hey, here's my card, here come to a barbecue next week, come hang out? No, I wouldn't be okay with that. I would leave on like terms where they're like, hey, you got to go. And I've had that happen. We're like, hey, you just got to bounce. like right now, you got to go, because they knew I wasn't going to stop, because I was standing up for their family. And so when you talk to a client and you communicate do you communicate that story to them like every time? Is it a part of your in-home, or is it based off of certain situations? What does that look like as far as you communicating and letting that client kind of live in that story themselves?
Well, I mean, between that, my ex-husband and my dad, it's a variety of where you see the value in your family. And when it comes to placing it and seeing importance, I will. And I understand why God put me in this position later in life, because I didn't understand the validity. So when I sit with somebody, it's one of the three. It's my dad, my ex-husband, or my brother. And all of them hold a lot of merit. Like a young couple, look at my ex-husband, and you and I both know this time last year, he wasn't doing so well.
Right.
And we were praying out loud to see that he could survive. And he's grateful the fact that even though he didn't want to, there was life insurance in place to make sure that our children had something. And what it looked like if he did pass away, what he looked like for me, his ex-wife, mother of 3 kids. When I look at that, I look at what are we going to be grateful for? So I think when I sit in front of a client, it's really which story takes home, because whether it be Brian's story, whether it be stories that you've told me, stories that I've heard, countless people say, or things that I've experienced in the home, when you tell a story, just like when you hear a song, I think that people relate it to their own lives. Like, you're so vain, but the vanity is there. People want to make sure their family's taken care of. But if you place a story, everybody, no matter what, you tend to foot yourself into that story.
Mm-hmm.
And depending who I'm talking to and what it's about, whether it be final expense, I'd look at my dad. My dad died of renal failure, had a heart attack when he went in for a foot infection. Or somebody who's young and taking care of your family, not planning ahead, I'd bone to my brother. And if I look at a dad who's working and then the mom who's not, I look at my ex-husband. Because had my ex-husband put himself in a good position, because we did it here, Family First Life. But what would it have looked like if he didn't? When he was in a coma, my concern wasn't him passing and me not taking care of our kids. My concern was him passing and my kids not having a father. The gravity is so much different between being with my brother on life support and being with my ex-husband in a coma. The gravity is different between each situation. So I express it to them that way.
That's so good. I mean, because think about the client in that moment, realizing that they're at this crossroads where they're either going to live, be in a situation where they feel like you feel when you're sitting alongside your brother, or they're going to feel the way you felt when you were sitting along beside your ex. They see, okay, I'm going to be one of these, because it's either one or the other.
Yep.
And so that's so good to say, like, hey, this is why I'm here. And so you could be seated at this bed, feeling this sort of way, having your thoughts focused here, not tied over here. That's great. All right, let's bounce to Coleman. Coleman, how you doing, dude?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How you doing? Thanks for having me on the Next Level Live, man.
Hey, good to have you, man. So you definitely have some clout the last 8 months, 20K producer month in, month out, got a good growing team. I have a lot of producers writing 20,000, and you got there really quick too. You got on board and very fast. You were at that 20K plus a month. And I do believe, as I've talked to you, same thing. You're really good at communicating your story and reminding yourself of your story. And so talk about that, man. Talk about your story, because I think everybody on this call, as they lean in, they can, take some stuff, and maybe you have a client that's going to fit the story, where if you talk about what Coleman's situation and the story that he's got is going to allow them to see themselves, and you can lead, guide, and direct them to getting that plan in place for their family. And so, Coleman, again, thanks, man. But go to share your story with us and what that looks like.
Yeah, man, is again, thank you for having me on, and it's very similar listening to, Rochelle. I was a victim of, life insurance when I was 18 years old, man. I always call this story when I'm sitting with a client, what if it's the last time you spoke, to the most important person in your life? Being 18 years old, a senior in high school, I lost my dad. The last time I ever, spoke to my dad, I was on the phone with him. I lived 2 hours away. I lived with an aunt and uncle, and I was on the phone with him, and I got mad about a pair of shoes. You know, my, it's touching because today's August 28th, and my dad died August 28th, 2005. You know, and the last time I talked to him, I got mad and I hung up the phone over a pair of shoes. And a week later, you know what I mean? I got a call from my grandfather saying that your dad just passed out of nowhere, just sudden. And the last time I talked to him, I was mad at him. And I just kind of convey that to my clients. If I'm sitting with somebody with final expense, I tell that story, after I figure out why they filled out the form. Why am I here? I let them know that this may be the last time that you're talking to your family, And the way I was affected by not having life insurance, man, is I had to, get money to get 2 hours away. So I had to get my basketball coaches to donate their parents. I remember we didn't have enough money for me to even get to the funeral. So that kind of touched me right there. So I just remember those stories, man. And, that's the last time I ever talked to my father. I showed pictures of my father, the last picture we ever took together. And then 8 years later, you can think that everything's getting better. You're off at college and you're growing. And 8 years later, when your only sibling that's 29 years old, that's 4 years older than you get a call while you're on your break at work that he collapsed and died. How do you go with that? And I know it's a little emotional, but I just kind of like that silence for the client to feel that silence so they can think that I actually experienced it and I lived through it, So, I just kind of use that conviction and that, without having life insurance, man, it's tough. It's tough. It's not about you. It's who's going to clean up the pieces when you die. Who's going to clean up? Who is going to be affected? And it just kind of gives me that confidence to talk to them, to not be a fear of rejection, not be in fear of what they're going to say to me because I've been affected by it. Does that make sense, Paul?
Dude, it makes perfect sense, man. And I think that when you've got that right, when you go in, your focus is on what you've experienced, and you make life insurance real to you, because it is real. Again, it can seem abstract for some because they're not thinking about it. It's not on their forefront of their mind. But when you go in and you put on the forefront of your mind and you focus on that, you don't focus on your bills and what you need to get and what that looks like. You're going to go out there and be effective for that client. You're going to lead with passion and conviction. And that's what I'm hearing, man, is that's what you've done. And you take a look at, I was talking to this agent a couple months back, and he said, man, the 8 steps to final expense. He's like, that makes sense. I like the flow, how it's fluid. He's like, that's really good. I'm using it. He's like, how'd you put that together? And I was like, man, I just sucked long enough to figure it out, got enough calls to figure it out and made some adjustments and copied a lot of things. But what I realized was this: about a year ago, I went and I booked an appointment. It was funny. My daughter had come in and I had a lead that had came in. And so she was sitting there like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm getting ready to allocate this lead. And she said, what's the lead? And I talked to her about it. And I said, watch, you want me to call? She said, yeah, call. So I called and booked the appointment. And then once I had the appointment booked, I was like, I got to go. And so this is probably about, 9 months ago or a year ago or so. I go to the client's house, and it was Bob and Gretchen. And I sit down with them, and I put together the 8 steps, by the way. Like I kind of, I train on, that's what I did all the time. And so I went in and I literally forgot every step, because I'd done it so long. I was a disaster. I was like, I like froze like I did my first appointment. I just stared at them. They thought it was like a staring contest. Like, what in the heck are you doing, dude? And I was lost, And then what I realized was, like, at the end of the day, I remember, like, It's not about, the flow, making sure I go through the process, I go through this, I go through that next. I just need to care about the family. My focus is going to be caring about the family. And so that's what I did. I got back and I just said, it's not about me. And I started talking about stories and about how, my mom and just going through my situation, clients I'd sat with. And by the end of it, I had messed it all up. I was all over the place. I didn't really go through any of the 8 steps, but the client said this, and it just really kind of brought it to my mind again, that this is what it's all about. He said, Paul, I prayed last night that somebody would come over, and when they explained everything to me and they went through everything, I just felt like they really did care about me and my wife, and I could trust them. And he said, I really felt that from you, that it wasn't about anything other than you just really cared about us. He said, I just want to thank you. And at that point in time, I realized that, man, it doesn't matter. Competency, like being competent and what we think we need to know when we go sit with the clients. If you're brand new watching this, you're like, I need to know this. And what do I say when they say this? Be clear. I'm the one that put together the 8 steps and I screwed it up. I put the video and I messed it up. It was an absolute disaster. And so, when you think about that, it really just is rooted in, I got to be thinking about the client. I need to care about the client. Everything else, it'll work its way out. And so, Coleman, I think that was perfect, man. Thank you for sharing that, dude, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to bounce over here to Chris Alvarez. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Thank you, Paul. How you doing?
Doing great, man. Just like the others, man, like 30, 40,000 a month issue paid business, which again reflects, in my opinion, your conviction of what you're doing and how much you care about the clients. And so, talk about your story and kind of like, what you're going through and how you communicate that with client to use something that is tough. Everybody's story that they talked about, it was tough to go through and experience. And sometimes it's tough to even think about. It brings more emotion to it. But that's a story that you can use to really kind of help guide people to getting the most important thing in place, which is protection for the family. Sometimes that story, if it wasn't there for you to tell, you wouldn't have been able to get that client to move and get that plan in place. And so, Chris, if you can kind of talk about what that looks like for you, and then how you apply that in the in-home when you're talking to the clients, how you share that story. That way people, listening in and watching, they can kind of go out and apply the same thing when they're sitting with the client and able to articulate a story as well.
Absolutely. I have a couple stories, and they're all from my family. But currently, the story that I use is a true story. Obviously, is what I'm going through with my family. So it's hearing your guys' stories. It makes it tough. Coleman, you're just talking about your dad. That really touched my heart, because I'm going through it right now with my dad. He has stage 4 cancer. And it's changed things. It's a lot different now when I'm out on the field. Although it's different till it happens to you. Something happens to your family, then it's a whole different. It's on a different level. So how I use what I talk to people now. I mean, I've always had a conviction that this is something that we're here for a reason. We're not playing games. We're here to help people out, and people sense that. But when you're going through an experience where your dad is in critical, has got terminal cancer, and you can express that to your client that you're trying to help out when they're on the fence on making a decision. You tell them about it. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my dad. It's kind of funny, but he took me. He's the one that kind of got me into Family First Life. He's the one that told me about the first convention that we had here in Vegas. So he's kind of the one that pushed me to come here. So obviously, if it wasn't for God, but if it wasn't for my dad, I probably wouldn't be here doing this right now. This moment, this call. So my dad has stage 4 cancer, and it kind of just happened suddenly. Last year, he's a sales manager, and he's workaholic. He loves working. He loves to run around, and all of a sudden things change. He had a little bit of an emergency. We thought it was his gallbladder. He ended up going to the ER here in Las Vegas, and they just had an emergency surgery. They just thought he had a bad gallbladder. So long story short, they took it out. He had a lot of complications, but he became critical. And then they found out he has cancer, stage 4 cancer. It's in the liver now because they took the gallbladder. But I'm just trying to shorten the story. So what I tell people is the importance of living benefits, right? So my dad had a full-time job. He obviously lost his job. So, they could only pay you for so long, a month, 2 months, and then that's it. Your income's gone, right? So it's a lot easier to convey when we're doing like a HMS, or we're doing a living benefits, to try to explain to people, hey, that an illness can happen. And sometimes people, well, I'm not going to get sick. Well, my dad thought he wasn't going to get sick. He never thought, not even in a million years, that he was going to have stage 4 cancer. You just don't think that, So I share that. I mean, this just happened. I just wrote somebody up where they were, debating. They didn't have insurance. They've never bought an insurance. And I just shared that story with her. I said, hey, look, this is what I'm going through. And it's kind of funny because the importance of plugging into these calls is so important, because it makes it real, right? So like I tell the new agents, so you got to plug into this, because you hear, Rochelle's story, Coleman's story, Teresa's story, and then it becomes real. And so this is important. And so I was on a call prior to going to this appointment, and I forgot who it was, but someone was sharing their story, how in order for them to make it real on that client, they shared their story and they ended up buying. And so on the way over there, I mean, I was listening to that call, and then I just started thinking about the truth about what's going on with my family. And this lady was debating whether or not she should get life insurance. So I just shared the story with what happened with my dad, how he has, cancer, and how he lost his job, and how unfortunately I wasn't. I mean, I was able to get him life insurance prior to his cancer, but I was only able to get him like an Eagle Premier versus like a larger policy. And what really the truth of it is, the only thing that my dad could think of right now is legacy, like Rochelle was talking about, is like what is it going to look like when he passes away? How is my mom? The only thing he can think of is my mom. Is she going to be okay? My brother and me, finances. That's all he's thinking about right now. It's just, are they going to be set? So what I was telling her, hey, like when we're pushing the bigger premiums too, and if they can afford it, don't feel bad about it, because trust me, if someone gets sick, if they get sick and they need that money, most carriers do 80% on the critical terminal illness riders. So I shared that story with the lady, and right away I showed a picture of my dad. Right away she just gave me her checking account, her information for her bank. She was like, okay. It was just real, because it was the truth. I shared the truth with her, and they made it really easy to write the application. But like you were saying, Paul, the logic is one thing, but the emotion is definitely something that we need to share, because it makes them. It takes your role as a salesperson as to someone that you're there and you really care for them, and you're genuine and you really want to help somebody out, and it makes it real for the family.
Well, Chris, I mean, that was so good, dude. And I'll definitely be lifting your family up in prayer, lifting your dad up in prayer, dude, and declaring victory over that disease. This right here, if everybody got this, really got it, and I'm like praying that I get it even more, to a level where you go in and you just bleed with passion and caring for the client, you're going to be so effective. You're going to serve so many families. And in the end, I know it's cliche, but if you help enough other people get what they want, you're going to get what you want. You'll have a great financial situation. You'll be able to go out and write $40,000 a month, like Chris is doing each month, what Rochelle's doing every month, what Coleman's doing every month, what Teresa's doing every month. It's not that difficult. And it's not because you need to know more, right? That's the thing. If you could get your care more up, not your know more, everything starts to change. And so the one thing I would encourage you guys as we get close to closing here is to get a story, right? And everybody relates to different stories differently, and write down your story. There's different stories that I know that after sitting down with thousands and thousands of clients for over a decade, that because I didn't write it down, I forgot about it. You know, maybe you guys got better memory than me, but I forget stuff all the time. I don't know if I've got a deficiency or what, but write down the stories. And then rehearse those, think about it. You know, it doesn't even have to be your story. I became really effective using other stories when I didn't have a story in the beginning, and it was just as effective. And it's just like, if you go public speak somewhere, what do they typically do? The easiest way to get up and communicate is if you tell your story. You know, if you said, hey, you got to go public speak and talk about chemistry, dude, I'm going to start sweating, dude. I'm like, what? You know, but if you just say, go share your story, talk about, you know, your upbringing, talk about a story, tell us about yourself. It's just, even you, as nervous as it can be, it's easy to tell your story because it's yours. If you go sit with the client, as nervous as you could be as a newer agent, and we've got plenty of them on there. I mean, I think about how many new contracts this past week, how many people went into class. I can't remember the exact figure, but when Sean said it, I was like, dude, are you sure that additional 0 should be on there? It's unbelievable how many people are joining Family First Life right now. And then you look at the leaderboard and how many people that all have a story as well when it comes to their financial well-being beforehand. You're now like, that person wrote 30 grand. Like, how many people wrote 30 grand a month? If you're writing 30 grand a month, you're doing better than you probably were before you got here. There's not many people that make 30 grand a month in income. So you start looking at all these stories of how people are doing well and they're beating down the door to get here. The way you go out and be efficient and effective in the house to build some confidence is 2 things. Know that you don't need to be competent when you know people that are competent. My peace of mind came from, if I'm walking down a dark alley at night and it's just me, right? And there's a bunch of people, you know, looking at me, and I don't know if they're armed or not. I'm kind of sketched out a little bit, right? I could be worried. But if I'm walking with a bunch of Navy SEALs, you know what I mean? I feel good about it. I might even throw my hands up to try to start something. You know what I mean? Like I've got some backing, you know, and that's kind of what you want to look at in this business. You've got backing. You got people that are there to help, that are going to be there. If you need help in a home, they're going to pick up the phone. I mean, I think about Coleman, you know, he reaches out still the other day in the home. He knows what he's talking about with the client, but he just wanted some additional feedback. But you got to really, you know that you don't need to be but if you can care, get a story, write your story. You know, I remember my daughter, you know, she plays soccer, and in her soccer league, this was probably about 3 years ago, Rochelle, there was this one girl, her name was Beautiful. And she was about, like, I'm not making this up.
They legitimately named her Beautiful.
She was beautiful. Yeah, her name was Beautiful. She was 6'1", 6'1" at least. I'm not kidding. She's 10, by the way. Like, I'm not a big dude as it is. I felt like a tiny person. Like, I felt like a toddler. Her legs were about this big. Her legs are massive. Like, she was a beast, and she was good at soccer. She could kick the ball one side to the other. And my daughter, everybody on the team was scared of her. They're terrified of Beautiful. Like, literally, she kicked one time, she missed the ball, kicked a girl, and I think she broke her shin. I'm not making this up. Like, she was, so they were terrified. And so my daughter, Peyton, she's like, Dad, we're playing Beautiful tomorrow. And she's like, you know, she's scared about it. And I said, sweetie, you know, what you got to realize is you got this lizard brain. You know, it's a part of your brain which it doesn't comprehend logic. You know what I mean? I said, you got this lizard brain that's telling you a story. Like, she's going to murder you. You're going to get ran over. You're going to get injured. I said, what you got to do is you got to tell yourself a different story. You got to just focus and tell yourself a different story and see yourself and visualize yourself getting the ball, not worried about it, being confident going forward. I said that, you know, that's what you got to do because you got that lizard brain. So she goes out. In the next game, we're playing against Beautiful. She's going down the field, Beautiful is, and my daughter goes up to her, gets the ball from her, and goes down and shoots. She didn't make it, but she still took Beautiful on. And I said, sweetie, that was great. What'd you do? She said, man, Dad, that lizard's loud. I said, what'd you tell her? She said, I told that lizard to shut its mouth, and I'm getting the ball, you know. And I was laughing because it's like, a lot of times we work from that lizard brain, and when we go sit with clients, or when we step into taking more leads, or when we start investing in our business, whatever the next level is, whatever raising your basis is for you, if you don't tell yourself the right story, if you don't hold on to the right story, by default, you're going to operate from the wrong story. And it's going to be a negative one. It's going to be one that's screaming at you, that little voice that's messing you up. And you got to suppress that. You got to suppress it and intentionally pick up the right story. When you go sit with a client, guys, grab one of these stories and tell yourself this story before you get out of your car. That's going to empower you to not think about yourself and to think about them. And so I hope today you got quite a few different stories. Write it down, grab it, tell yourself the story, visualize the story, and then go out there and tell the story to clients. And what you'll find is at the end of the day, you'll have clients that become raving fans. And the reason being is because all you did was you were telling stories, letting them live in the story, emotionalize it, feel it, and then you just guided them towards the outcome that they could have now imagined, the right outcome, which is protection for their family. And if you can do this day in and day out, you're going to serve a lot of families. You're going to serve your family well, and you'll make a massive difference here with Family First Life. So guys, thank you for joining it. Make it a massive week. Stay strong, stay steadfast, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.